Becky Robinson is the entrepreneur and founder CEO of Weaving Influence Incorporated, an online influence building company. She works with authors and thought leaders to help them show up online in the same powerful ways they show up in real life. Becky is also a mom to 3 wonderful daughters. She has been married since 1993. Work, family, and faith are her 3 top priorities, and not necessarily in that order. Becky lives in Lambertville, Michigan, across the border from Toledo, Ohio. She works both in Weaving Influence's local office and remotely from her home office. Working from a home office allows her the ability to be present with her daughters. Weaving Influence exists as a core employee team and a virtual dispersed team. Becky's job is to mobilize her team as a unified whole to serve their clients with consistent excellence.
Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening.
So Becky, to kick things off, tell us about your career and how you got into it in the first place.
Sure, Nancy, I would love to. So I started my business, Weaving Influence, in 2012, and I did so after taking a break from a career to stay home with my 3 daughters. So I'd been out of the workforce for a while, and my husband said to me, Becky, what will you do for work when the kids are all in school? And Nancy, I'll tell you, I laughed at him because I couldn't imagine a world in which I could get back to having a vital career after taking such a long break. But I got started basically toward creating my business by doing some freelance writing, which evolved into freelance social media marketing, which I learned by doing it back in 2009. Then in 2011, I got a job working for a leadership consultant, and the very first project he had me working on was launching his business book. It was my experience launching his business book that started to give me some visibility with others who came to me to ask them to support their book marketing efforts, which finally led me to founding my company then in 2012.
That's awesome. Were you a big business book reader prior to that? I know that I love reading business books, and that helps get me motivated and energized.
You know, not so much, because as I said, I had spent about 10 years not working at all. So I was more into picture books than business books. But I very quickly became familiar with a lot of leadership books and authors when I dove into the space.
Well, of course, I know from personal experience from publishing my own book, PR Works, that having a book is really kind of like having an oversized business card. It's really kind of the best business card if you can give someone a copy of your own book, and if it has quotes from other influential people in it, and obviously all your information, and tells kind of how you do what you do. What is your best how-to tip for promoting a book, whether it's PR, marketing, social media, or personal branding?
Well, that's a really good question, Nancy. And I think that the best tip that I would have for any author or aspiring author is to really begin to build a network of people who are interested in your work before you bring the book to market. So, Nancy, I've yet to traditionally publish a book. I've written a lot of ebooks as resources for our clients and networks. But I view this time that I've been in business, 8 years so far, as really being my own journey toward building the audience that might eventually buy my book when I write it. So the number one tip is prepare as far in advance as you can to market your book. Give as much value away as you can in advance of marketing a book so that you have a ready audience of people who are interested and willing to buy and read and promote your book when it comes out.
I love that. When you say give as much away as possible before you publish your book, it reminds me of Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Jab, 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 Left Hook. And his whole premise says you got to just jab, jab, jab. That's give, give, give. And then left hook, come in and like, oh, now would you like to buy my book? And so that was a really inspirational book for me to read too.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, except he does drop a lot of F-bombs. I would never want to listen to one of his audiobooks or podcasts with my mother in the room.
That's probably a great tip for those who might be listening who aren't aware of Gary's style.
So how do you measure your success in PR, social media, and marketing, Becky?
You know, a lot of that depends upon the author and the goals that they outline when we begin work together. So people write different books for different reasons. You know, people have different big picture goals that they're looking to reach. And so for every project that we work on, we identify together what the metrics for success are, what matters most to that author. And then we track our ROI against those previously stated goals. So I'll give you some examples. You know, some authors, one of the goals that we set is around Amazon reviews, because I believe that Amazon reviews provide really important social proof that a book is worth reading and helps an author to get momentum and exposure for their title. So many times when we're working on a book marketing campaign with PR and social media, part of the goal is, you know, how many Amazon reviews can we get? And one key milestone for me is to get authors past that 50 Amazon review mark. You know, as it relates to social media, one of the things that we want to see is engagement from people's following. So it's not really enough to grow, you know, X number of followers. It's really arbitrary. Sometimes that's an ego-driven metric. What we want to see instead is engagement. You know, can we get website traffic as a result of someone's social presence? Can we grow an email list of people who give you permission to stay in contact with them? As it relates to book marketing, many authors do have a metric of book sales. And we also encourage them to really think about the bigger picture business priorities that they have for their book. So while an author may never make back their PR and marketing investment in book sales alone, those who are doing training or consulting or speaking, oftentimes will see that they get incredible results by bringing their book into the world in a way that gets them great exposure and awareness, because it is driving those sales of the bigger ticket items that they have on offer.
That's a good way to look at it. Again, because the way I look at a self-published business book is it's just like a business card. And you're really, I don't think, unless you are Gary Vaynerchuk or Jay Baer, or Scott Stratton, you're probably not going to make the kind of revenues with book sales as you will with ultimately selling your services, whether it's consulting or marketing or advertising. So I think it's a good idea to have larger goals than book sales.
Certainly. So I think for all the books I've launched, and my team and I have launched over 125 books in the last 8 years with business book authors. There's one that I can think of who has made significant royalties from her book. And there are others who, you know, certainly have sold 10,000, 20,000 copies of their book, which does bring some revenue, but it doesn't compare to the revenue that people can generate as a result of those bigger business offers.
Nice. That's really incredible to sell 10,000 to 20,000 books. So those authors must have really put in a great deal of effort. And obviously you helped them significantly as well.
Yes, thank you. We do tend to work more with traditionally published authors than with self-published authors. You know, I find that generating PR and article placements or, radio or TV is sometimes much more difficult with people who have a self-published book. So we do work, I would say maybe 3/4 with traditionally published authors.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I think a lot of authors think that going with a publishing house means that they will get PR services, but I know from having worked with fiction writers in the past that the amount of PR and marketing that's allocated to each author by a publishing house such as HarperCollins or other national publishers, it's pretty limited. They have sort of a checklist of what they do with the advance copies, and but they're not really delving into the Amazon reviews and things that you're talking about. Is that true?
Well, it is true. And I think that there's a huge gap between what an author expects their publisher to do and then what the publisher is actually able to deliver. So in the time that I've been working with authors, which, like I said before, is about 8 years now, every year I see that publishers are more and more stretched in terms of their ability to deliver support to authors. And, authors increasingly are unaware. They come into a book publishing deal with a traditional publisher. They expect to get a lot of attention. They expect to get a lot of support or lift. And while I do believe there's value in partnering with a traditional publisher, I think authors need to have their eyes wide open to the fact that they really will be responsible to a large degree, either to market the book themselves or to hire an outside publicity or marketing firm to support them.
Yeah, I think that many authors need to hire an outside publicity or marketing firm because I think by nature, authors are introverted people who really don't want to put themselves out there. I think it's unnatural for many authors to be out in the limelight the way you really need to be to do a lot of PR and marketing, especially if you're going to go out on a national book tour. I think a lot of authors would rather just stay home and write more books.
Well, I think that's true. And I think that if we look at, many of the books that might make the New York Times bestseller list in nonfiction, a lot of times the books that show up there are not necessarily the best written books or, the books with the best ideas. And that has to do with the disconnect. It's those people who have a recognizable name or celebrity of some kind who are selling more books. And those people who have worked really hard at their craft or done a lot of research and been behind the scenes aren't necessarily able to get the exposure that they need or want to get their ideas into the world. So it can be painful. It can be frustrating for authors who, have really written a wonderful book, but yet potentially haven't invested over time in that celebrity status or that influencer status that will help them to reach more readers with their book.
Yeah, so I know we hadn't planned to talk about this, but Hometown Books is an initiative that you started to help recognize those hometown authors. I think that's awesome.
Well, thanks, Nancy. So Hometown Reads is something I started back in 2016. And, to be completely transparent, we have not given a lot of investment energy to it in the last year or two. I deeply care about the plight of, those individual authors who are out there, many of them self-published, who aren't getting the exposure that they want for their books. And we wanted to create the site as a way to give some additional exposure. However, there was no revenue model attached to it. So I invested a lot of time and money and energy into it. And at a certain point, I ran out of steam. The site's still up. Authors can still add their books, but we're not giving a lot of time or energy to the project now. It's something I still care deeply about. And so if there's anyone listening to this podcast who's interested in the site, who would want to talk about ways to give it some new life, I'd be open to volunteers and input about how to give exposure. The premise around that, Nancy, really was that many authors, like you said, are introverted. They'd rather stay home and write more books, and they may not even be known by the people who live around them. So I created the site with the premise that if authors could get some exposure first from their local communities and could identify some readers amongst their neighbors and close colleagues, that as those people would share their books on social media, that they could reach the world, because everyone just needs that push, right? And I still believe that is a great way for many authors to start with the people you know, start where you are, and get your book out to the people who would care about you and be in your close network. And from there, mobilize fans to share your book with others.
Right. Well, I think that's awesome. And the other thing that I think is great about Hometown Reads is that when an author can connect with the bookstore in their hometown and get some promotion through their local bookstore. Again, I do a lot of tourism PR, and I think it's really nice for tourists who are coming into an area if they can go into the local bookstore and find books that are written by local authors. I think that kind of completes a trip to a certain area of the country or the world. So I think Hometown Reads is a great idea. And yes, hopefully someone listening will want to help give it some extra energy or life. I know I found it this morning before our conversation when I was Googling around about you. So I always call that Google juice. It still has some Google juice, Becky, because it showed up in my search.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Well, we were so, we gave a lot of energy to it back in 2016 and 17. And one of our goals at the time was to have at least one location in every state. I don't think we actually made that goal before we stopped our exposure. But did you happen to notice if we have a main location? I think we do.
I'm sorry, I did not notice, but I will look immediately after this, and we'll include it in the show notes.
Perfect. So if you're a Maine author who's a fan of Nancy's, we would invite you to add your book at hometownreads.com.
I do know a lot of authors, so that will help, yeah.
Wonderful.
So, Becky, what do you attribute to the long-term success of your firm?
One of the key tactics for me, and I guess it's not really a tactic, it's a way of life or a value of mine, is generosity. So when I started my business, I had the chance prior to starting to really get to know a lot of bloggers in the leadership business space. And I got to know them without any agenda in mind. I wasn't trying to sell anything. I was able to develop a lot of strong relationships. And along the way, I've continued to look for ways to give to others, whether that be through free webinars or free ebooks, really showing up to offer value in the world without expecting to get anything in return. And I think as a result, I've seen this kind of biblical principle come to life in my life. There's a verse that Jesus says, "Give and it will be given to you, pressed down, shaken together." And so even when I get tired in my business or things are difficult or facing challenges like we all have in 2020 with the COVID-19 crisis, I'm reminded that I can never give away more than I get back. And so it gives me endurance to continue to give away what I can.
Well, that just makes me feel so good about you, Becky. And I'm sure that goodwill out there in the universe does come back to you. And I think you and I have the same personality in that we love to help our clients and others make connections that help their business ultimately. So I think that's kind of a common trait of PR people. For me, I get such joy when I introduce two people that I know to each other that results in something that benefits both of them. Actually, I did it this morning. I have a friend who I ran into at the grocery store the other day, and she's literally running out of money. Like her business is a social club that can't have its meetings right now. And so she needs temporary work. And I was able to introduce her to another friend who owns a business who needs to hire people. And it's like, wow, this is so awesome. I was able to benefit both of them. And so I feel that that's how you operate as well. And I'm sure that generosity comes back to you in spades.
Thank you.
So, Becky, what has been the biggest challenge for you in your business?
Oh, wow. How much time do we have?
I feel you.
Yeah. So, that's an interesting question. I think there are a number of challenges that we face. And you and I talked before we started the recording about the decision to have employees or not have employees and to use contract workers and to develop, a team of people who can work together well. I think, not having come from a business background, one of the challenges for me has been figuring out how to lead well, figuring out how to create the company culture that will engage my team in wanting to do great work together. I think that, with the challenge of leading well also comes the joy of seeing that hard work and attention I give to leading well have benefits in the relationships with the people that I'm working with. So the challenge to learn how to lead well and create a positive organizational culture, is one that I'm continually learning about. But I think there are also these other challenges of being a business owner that quite often, people don't talk about or see. So what do you do when the revenue isn't there? What do you do when a crisis like the one that we're facing now happens and people pause work or, no longer reach out for new work? I've had different financial challenges along the way in my business, including, some unexpected challenges back in 2018 that we rallied from. I think every day brings its own set of challenges, but those are a few.
Well, believe me, as a business owner myself, I know that it's hard to think about other things, especially when times are difficult. And it's been part of my life for a long time now to deal with the constant pressure and stress.
Indeed. I try to think about the gift that it is, though. What a good problem to have a team of 12 employees who I care about, who do great work. And what a great opportunity to be able to fight for them, to find out new ways to offer value and to drive revenue even in difficult times. And I like to try to think about what's on the other side of that and the stories that we'll be able to tell someday about, wow, it was hard, but I got through it. It's also the reason I run marathons, Nancy. People wonder, why on earth would you want to put your body through that and run 26 miles? And I've done it 10 times. And part of the reason is to remind myself that I am strong. I can face difficult things. I can endure and persevere, and to look back and think, oh, crap, that was a really hard run, but guess what? I finished it. And it's those stories that we can look back on when we recount the difficult things that we've faced and then overcome that can help me to keep going at times like these.
That is so impressive. And I think that having that kind of focus and discipline is one of the keys to success. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you've heard of John Lee Dumas, who comes from the great state of Maine. And one of the gifts that he sent out recently was one of his mastery journals to everyone who was on his Facebook group for his podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire. So actually, I've been using the time during COVID-19 to create daily journal entries and set goals for every day to stay productive. Because I think during this time of working remotely and working at home, it'd be really easy just to kind of binge watch Breaking Bad or some other series like that. But instead, I think it's really great to try to use this time for something productive in the long term.
I definitely agree with that, Nancy. And I'm a big fan of John and his podcast.
Me too. So shout out to John Lee Dumas. Mm-hmm. So we're going to continue our conversation with Becky shortly, but I want to share some exciting news with you about how you can connect with me about the podcast. We've created the PR Maven podcast listener line, and you can now call 207-620-9075 and get in touch to ask me questions, share feedback, or ideas for the podcast, including who you'd like to hear on the show as future guests. I look forward to hearing from you, and right now we'll take a quick break and be back in just a moment.
This This podcast is all about growing your network in order to strengthen your brand. In my 30-plus year marketing and PR career, I have seen many organizations waste their precious time and money on marketing because they're trying to obtain success without any strategy to achieve their goals. So many organizations and companies suffer from what I call the shiny object syndrome, trying every new fad that comes down the pike. That's why I created the Marshall Plan 15 years ago. We have done over 100 of these plans for clients, helping them to get out of their day-to-day routine to identify their goals, solidify their brand story, focus in on their ideal customer avatar, analyze their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and create a realistic budget and measurement dashboard. We create the Marshall Plan collaboratively with our clients over the course of 3 months. We have a 65-step process to create a highly customized, actionable plan. And it's not like we come in and say, we are the consultants from away and we know everything. Instead, we come in and say, let's sit down at the table with your leadership team and we'll bring our expertise in what's working in PR and marketing. And our client team brings their knowledge of what's working in their organization. And together we come up with a really amazing plan. For many, it's been a transformative process. I have watched how teams have come together and their faces light up because they have such a sense of accomplishment and they're so excited about the future of their organization. We help our client figure out the best way to implement the plan, sometimes using people within their organization and sometimes with our help. We would love to chat with you about how you can expand your network and achieve your marketing goals with a Marshall Plan. Go to marshallpr.com/MarshallPlan to learn more about the process, or better yet, send me an email at nancy@prmaven.com and we'll set up a time to talk and get started. And now back to our conversation.
Welcome back. And today we're talking with Becky Robinson, founder and CEO of Weaving Influence Incorporated. And I want to dive right back in with some more questions. Becky, what is unique about Weaving Influence that sets you apart from other firms?
That is a great question. I think the main uniqueness about us as a digital marketing agency is our focused niche with business book authors, consulting companies, and training organizations. So primarily, those are the types of clients we serve. And while there are a lot of book publicity agencies out there, I don't think any have worked to the extent that we have to develop the audiences who are interested in the types of books and authors and training organizations that we support.
Well, certainly I think that having a niche like that is very smart. You know, there's an expression, the riches are in the niches. And I think to be known for that niche is very smart. I'm curious about the company name, Weaving Influence. Were you into weaving previously? Did that have to do with choosing that name?
No, not at all. So the name of the company actually was my husband's idea, and we picked the name before I actually had the company. So I was making a transition. I had been freelance writing a leadership blog in 2009 and 2010. And when that blog ended, I wanted to start my own blog, and I decided that I would continue to write about leadership topics, but also, weave together some thoughts about social media marketing and influence building. And, at the time I wasn't planning on building a business. So I named the blog Weaving Influence, after some brainstorming with my husband. We just liked kind of the visual picture of the idea of making a difference. I think at the time when I launched the blog, I used the tagline, finding everyday ways to make a difference. And, when it came time that I was going to launch a business, I had some other business ideas, but it just made sense that that was the brand I was building in the world. And one of the things that's been interesting for me, I know quite often a lot of agencies are known by the name of their founder. And while I certainly know that some people say, oh, I'm going to hire Becky to work on my book, I think really my company does have a brand of its own, and people know who we are as Weaving Influence beyond just me as an individual owner of the company.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. As somebody who has an agency named after myself, Marshall Communications, it can be a blessing and a curse, because when you do have a team, you want the others to be validated as well and recognized as experts in their own right. So I think it was very smart of your husband to come up with that name. I think it's really great. And I was just wondering if you were into weaving. But I know
no, not at all.
You weave influence, literally.
Yes. Well, and a note about that, Nancy, I've had clients ask me before who are interested in moving and shifting from the brand being all about their name to the brand being their business name. And the way that it worked for me is that in the beginning, I actually had my name as part of the business name. So it was Becky Robinson Weaving Influence on the top of my website, on my Facebook page. And then as my team became, more well-known and more important, and as we built identity for the company that was separate from my own identity, we dropped my name from all of it. So we had this transition of my name, my face, the company name, to just my name and the company name, and then finally just the company name in all of our communication.
Yeah, well, that was a really great transition that you went through, I'm sure. And I think it's probably done a lot for employee attraction. And as I said, making the employees feel like they're also a very important part of the team.
For sure. And I have to give a shout out. I work with some incredibly amazing people, and I couldn't do what I do without them. So, just lots of love to them today if they're listening.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they appreciate you as their leader as well. I can tell you have a very big heart, and I'm sure that goes a long way with your employees and your clients as well. So most successful people have a network of fans and followers, either online or in person or both. Have you built your network of fans and followers intentionally, or has it happened on its own?
That's a great question, Nancy. And by far, I have built it intentionally. So one of my beliefs about showing up online is that focused, consistent effort makes a huge difference. So while my business only extends back to 2012, I've been showing up online, building connections, building relationships, sharing content since 2009. And, I'm not always, super consistent. I know in the early years before I had my business, I would show up on Twitter every day. I would seek to interact and engage with people. And I think that made a huge difference when my business was getting started. Clearly, as I've been busier, I haven't blogged as frequently. I may not post as frequently, but I'm still intentional to show up with value in the world. So recently, my team and I launched the series called The Daily Connection, which is a daily webinar series during this COVID-19 crisis to provide encouragement and training and learning and inspiration. So each day I've been hosting a guest for a 30-minute, video webinar. And that's another way that I'm intentionally showing up to build my community of fans and friends and followers, and to continue to add value and make a positive difference.
Wow, what a big undertaking, though, to do a daily, essentially a TV show every day during this time period. I'm very impressed with that.
Well, thanks. I think the upside is that I don't take it too seriously. So, while I try to make sure that my hair's okay and that I'm dressed for the camera, I'm not a person who worries too much about what I look like, so I can just show up. I'm also not a person who worries too much about scripted content. So we really are showing up each day to have a conversation with the people who are attending and with the guest, and to let the guest content and ideas shine. I think, in my opinion, and I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, done is better than perfect. I don't aim for perfection, but I do aim to show up in whatever way I can.
Well, again, I'm sure that people can tell that about you. And I think that's awesome. As a matter of fact, I think now if you show up on like a Zoom call and you're dressed up or you have lipstick on or something, people are a little taken aback by that. Because I feel like, especially now that hairdressers aren't working, who knows? I don't know about you, but my hair, I don't even know what color it's going to be in a month from now. I don't know what color my hair really is. I've been coloring it for so long.
That's so funny. Well, I feel fortunate that I had some dye at home for my roots. And when the stay-at-home order first started, one of my daughters helped me with that. So at the moment, my hair color is still okay. I don't know how long it will last. But, I know that there are delivery services. I keep hearing a lot about this Madison Reed. So maybe we all just need to order from Madison Reed and keep our hair color good at least.
I am definitely a target for Madison Reed because those tests that they have, and I've actually even gone through it already. It's very good online marketing. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, it would. No one paid me to talk about Madison Reed, but here we go.
Right, exactly. Me too. And they've got this online test where you say what color your hair should be and what color you think it really is, and they make recommendations. So, yep, I think
so
that's
fun.
Probably.
And we who are 50-something women are grateful to have that delivered to our houses.
Yes, thank goodness for those delivery services. Becky, in your line of work, is there a resource such as a book, a website, or an app that you have found helpful, and why?
That's a great question, Nancy. So I guess I could talk about a couple of tools that my team and I use to do business that are exceedingly helpful. Again, no one's paying me to talk about these resources, but I'm a huge fan of the project management software Basecamp. I've been using Basecamp to run my business from the beginning. And, it provides a great way for our team to collaborate, communicate, stay connected, get work done. I don't really know how I would run my business without it. So for people who might be interested in starting a business where people are working remotely or, even just dealing with projects that have a lot of moving parts, I highly recommend Basecamp. And, a side note about Basecamp, they are offering their software for free to first responders during the COVID-19 crisis, which I think is amazing. So Basecamp is a tool that I find invaluable in my business. Another tool that I love and I'm a huge fan of is Buffer, which is a social media scheduling tool that we use in crafting and posting social media content for our clients. We've also been using Buffer since nearly the beginning of my business. So that's another one. I'm also a fan of the media query service HARO and also ProfNet, Help a Reporter Out, helps us to identify stories that are happening in journalists who are looking for sources. And we've been using that since the beginning of our business as well.
Well, those are three really good resources. I have definitely heard of Basecamp and HARO, but I had not heard of Buffer. So I will definitely check that out. And I think that's really great that Basecamp is offering that software for free to first responders during COVID-19. So shout out to them for being compassionate and giving during this terrible time.
Agreed.
So, Becky, is there a parting thought you'd like to share with PR Maven Nation today?
Sure, Nancy. I think that one of the things that stands out to me from our conversation is this idea of making a difference and giving as much as we can. And, I think that for anyone who's listening, who's wondering about how to get started in business or how to supercharge their business, considering the value of giving to others, to encouraging others, to supporting others, and showing up consistently over time with value for others. I highly recommend that approach to business and life. And I hope that, if that hasn't been a value of yours, that you might try it out and see what joy and connection comes to your life as a result.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Becky. And I definitely feel the same way. as I said, I'm definitely a connector myself. So for me to be able to share introductions with people that I know gives me great joy. And I do believe that if you are a giving person, it will definitely serve you in the long run and come back around. The universe will deliver back to you.
Yes, so thank you for your generosity and inviting me on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, that's the whole purpose of PR Maven Nation is, the platform that I've grown this podcast on is the idea that we all need to connect both in person and online. And if you meet someone online, then you need to endeavor to meet them in person. And if you meet somebody in person, you need to extend the relationship online. So you and I have not yet met in person, but I'm going to have that on my to-do list is to figure out a conference or someplace we can both meet. Maybe we could go on a bike ride. Maybe someday you'll come and do the trek across Maine.
That sounds amazing. I've never visited Maine, and so certainly, after this conversation, a trip to Maine is on my list. And riding my bike across Maine sounds like an amazing adventure. Please invite me.
I will. I'm going to send you the information right after we get done with this podcast today. So, Becky, what are some of the best ways our listeners can get in touch with you?
Sure. So I would invite anyone to send me an email anytime. I'm Becky at weavinginfluence.com. I would love to connect on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. On most of those channels, my profile is my first name, Becky, my last name, Robinson, except without the vowels. So Becky, RBNSN on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram. I also have a personal brand site, BeckyRobinson.com, where I blog exceedingly infrequently about insights into building a business, running, life, and I would invite people to find me there.
Well, those are awesome ways to connect with you, and I will look for you in all of those places because I believe social media was created so that I could just socialize 24/7. So I will look for you.
Well, thank you. I know you already found me on LinkedIn, so I appreciate that so much, Nancy.
Yeah, well, thanks, Becky. And I wish you all the best with your business and with getting through this difficult time. And I believe that those of us who are planting seeds right now for when things get back to what I'm calling the new normal, I feel that that things will just work out well. And as you said, we're putting positive feelings and we're helping those who are less advantaged than we are. And I think it will all come back around. So I wish you all the best, Becky, and I want to thank you for joining me today. And I want to thank everybody in PR Maven Nation for joining us as well. And I hope you have a great week, PR Maven Nation.
That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.